Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to part 2 of my Dub Techno 5 Ableton template explanation. Basically, this template I've been creating live during my live stream session. It's every 2 Mondays, you can come around and I create track from scratch. Last week we talked about each track, the sound design, the composition, and this week we're gonna talk more about the idea of the track, the arrangement, the automation, variation, the mixing and mastering. Alright, so let's have a listen how it sounds. Alright, so that gives you an idea of the track. Before to go into the structure, I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea, how the idea came, and a little bit of the process to arrive to a track like this. So it mainly all started with this chord to... You know, obviously that's the main element of the Dub Techno track. It's usually this dubby chord. At least one of them you can have some entering each other, but here I have one playing like every time on the beat. Originally the track was a bit slower. Now it's 125, but it was 120. I decided to accelerate a little bit later on. Just I felt like it was too kind of slow. I don't know if it's because how the chord was. You know, sometimes the effect you use and everything, it works better if it's a bit faster or no. Because of the bass line as well, I just felt like everything was working well together in a higher BPM. But yeah, this was this chord that kind of lead to everything, and I built my track around. Yeah, I remember at some point I felt it was kind of missing a little bit something, so that's where I decided to create the return, which I could send my chord, and with the return you can add movement, and that's what I did with, you have a dub delay here, you have as well a kind of a pitch reverse delay as well, which add different texture. And yeah, once I had this, obviously I knew I needed some extra element to kind of bring a little bit of freshness to the track, and that's where I created this track chord 4 and 3. That's gonna add a bit of variation during this part of the track where the main chord is not playing. So once I had that, I started to build. I had a bit of struggle, especially with the intro. I didn't know if I put first the drum and then the kick and bass, or just straight away the kick and bass, or just first the chord and then the kick and bass and then the drum. On the end, that's how I did: chord first, then bass, kick, and then the drums. But yeah, the rest of the arrangement kind of came naturally, where then I will have the first part playing with the main chord, and then I will have kind of a verse where it will be more like the 3 and 4 chord taking over, and then I will have a break where the main chord came back, and then on the chorus number 2, like kind of everything is playing together. It's a kind of arrangement that I like to say like A, B, and then A plus B, because you have A with this part with the chord 2, and then you have B with the chord 3 and 4 playing, and then you have this part here, which is A plus B, because you have the chord 2 plus the chords 3 and 4 playing together. Alright, so now that you have a little bit of a global arrangement idea and how everything came through, we're gonna go into the arrangement a bit more in detail, starting with the intro. So you will always, so for this one I start with the chord coming straight up. The main chord is gonna be obviously with the low pass filter introduced slowly, so you kind of hear it muffled at the beginning and it's opening more and more. And you have as well the ambience straight up from the beginning. This, I like to use this because it's usually set the mood straight away when you have these, and then it's the chord. Then you have this chord which is playing in between chord 2, who's gonna kind of co-answer with chord 2. And then we enter in the chorus where you have the kick and bass playing together straight away. I don't really have SFX transition. I didn't feel like to add for this track. I kind of find this way was the best way to introduce each element. You know, it's kind of a progressive track, and having the kick and bass before the drums was better. Sometimes it's worked the other way around, but for this track, that's how it works. So then, yeah, we got our kick and bass. Everything is grooving, and then we're gonna progressively add some hats and percussion to the track. Obviously keep in mind, because it's a progressive track, and the Dub Techno chord, there is a lot of automation variation we're gonna see later, which kind of make it always changing. see here the filter automation. Then we introduce this little clap. Okay, I wanted to talk about this part. This is something I like to do a lot. It's like when I have a very high energetic moment and I know that I need to go into another part of the track, into a changement, because it's been the same for too long. So I will usually have a break after. I like to do this kind of 8-bar thing where I will have just a little break before and then I get rid of the drum. So you go from something high in energy, especially in drum, into something without drums. Little cut, and then no drum. I don't know, I feel it always gives this feeling of, I don't know what, but I just like it. Here at one point I was actually thinking to do it without bass as well, which could have worked, maybe not that long, but let me see actually. Actually, that works pretty well. See, I just give you another extra arrangement tips on the fly like this. So yeah, it's actually, I kind of regret it how I haven't done it, to be honest, but anyway, we go into the break where we get rid of the kick. You can see I even get rid a little bit before. It just helps the transition. Usually when I go from one part to another part, when you know you're gonna remove stuff, sometimes when you remove too many things in the same time, it kind of sounds weird. And just like having the kick remove like half a bar before, it just help with the transition. So here in the break, what's gonna happen is that we're gonna get rid of our main chord. You can see you have the low pass filter. So the chord 2, we're gonna get rid of it, and we're gonna introduce chord 3 and 4. So that's our break to transition between the chorus and the verse. So then we go into the verse with no drum and this chord 3 and 4 playing. Then we're gonna progressively again add some hats and drum. So here with the hat and the perk in general, I do something I like to do. It's, you can see here we started first with the hat and then we had the clap. And I didn't want it to do again like, oh, we start first with the hat, then we had the perk and then we had the clap. So I always try to, when I introduce drums, we know when there is no drum and I introduce drum, to introduce in a different way than before. So for example, here I had just the hat and now I'm introducing with hat and perks. And then later on you can see I start with the perks and then I had the hat. I like to do that because then it's never really the same kind of pattern repeating. Then we're gonna introduce the clap. Alright, so you have to understand that a lot of things are happening, especially with the chord 2. Alright, then we're gonna go into the break 2. You can see here, I decided to leave the drums. I decided to leave the hat and perk for 4 extra bar. Again, same I did on before. Don't remove everything in the same time, so it's a bit smoother. And here again, we're gonna reduce the chord 3 and 4. Which was part of the verse, to introduce back the chord 2, which was part of the chorus. And yeah, then because it's a dub techno track, it's you like the break. The idea of the break was really like to kind of calm down a little bit, like to settle a little bit, to don't have always the kick, and like just a quiet moment, just to relax, and then to be able to go back to a groovy stuff later on. Just remember, the arrangement is also about dynamic, having like quieter moment, having moment very energetic, having moment a bit more calm, moment very loud, moment more quiet. It's all about balancing between all that, and that's what makes as well your arrangement interesting. Very calming synth. So here I've done something. Usually most of the time the chord is playing with a filter pretty low, you can see around 200, but then when I open more like this, it gets a longer release, like the synth, instead of being short and percussive, it gets more like long and sustained, and that's what I've used here for the break, to just add variation, add a bit of tension, and then I go back to the minimum. And then we have our chorus 2, which is pretty similar to the first chorus, except that now you have the chords 3 and 4 playing in the same time as well. And we're gonna have as well our kind of progressive arrangement with the hat and percussion. So now it's first the perc, like this shakering stuff. Because Dub Techno is always about that. It's about having this kind of same chord pattern, which is always evolving around the track, but you never really have that much crazy things going all around, or it's not like a type of music that you need something changing or a new element every 8 bar or so. You kind of take the time to let your dub chord loop do the work and evolve, and yeah, that's why you have a pretty progressive track. I like to do like that. So here the patterns are different as well. Here was the pattern more like this, and a more driving pattern, and yeah, then it's the clap. Right, and then we have what I call chorus 3, which is almost like pre-outro chorus 3. I didn't want it to do a long break between these two parts, because, you know, I like to keep things going with this track. So I just remove a bit of the kick for half a bar, and then I get rid of all of the drum. And this is kind of a special pattern because it's actually the synth playing similar to what was playing during the break, like this very more open filter, which leads to a more sustained sound chord. Which is interesting because it's something I haven't done really during the track, except during the break. Break even was not that long, and it just adds a bit of variation and kind of a new part in the track. That's why I call it chorus 3. And because I get rid of the drum, then after I will go straight into the outro. So I reckon the out is a bit brutal. Then we get really rid of the bass, so we lose the whole groove and the whole dancing part. We just have the kick. And then we don't have the kick. And then we finish on these little keys again. shouting. And then that's it. So that's for our arrangement. Obviously with this track there is a lot of modulation variation that you could see. We're gonna start with our main element, which is the Core 2. So you have Core 2 stereo, but it's exactly the same modulation, but for the stereo part. So obviously the first one will be the filter, like I explained already before. This is always making your filter move, will add a variation, especially in dub. You know, last week I talked about the LFO modulating the filter of the overdrive. This is gonna add obviously movement. You have as well a low pass filter here, which is modulated by the LFO from the device, which gonna add movement. And all these have different rates, so it's mean like it's never really moving like in a synchronized way. They have both different speeds, so they leads to kind of always different results. Afterward, I decided as well to add this 2-bit repeat track, which kind of create this glitchy effect. This is something I try again experimenting and I found it cool, so I add it. I try to don't overdo it because this kind of stuff usually say, oh, it's cool, but then you overdo it and it's kind of sound weird. I still feel maybe I overdo it a little bit, but it's always a bit tricky to find the balance, because if you don't do enough when it's happening, it feel like kind of weird, and if you do it too much, it feel like yeah, it's just feel like if you do it too many times, it's kind of feeling too much. So yeah, it's a bit tricky to find the right balance, but hope it's okay. We have our chord 4, which happened during our verse, which has a lot of modulation, obviously the filter, but you also have the FM, which give a different character as well. I play, you're gonna hear. You can hear how it's getting a bit more higher, more distorted as well. Yeah, this is usually stuff I play the track and I play live with the push or with the MIDI controller, it depends. Another thing I've done here, I send from time to time the sound into the return. You know that I have these 2 return, and so it's just to add a bit of variation. You're gonna hear, for example, here. You can hear the reverse. If I remove, nothing happening. But you can hear, and this is the dub delay. This is more like kind of a extra dub delay. So yeah, all of this variation, even if it's the same chord playing all around, it will add a lot of different variation. And here with chord 3 similar, so I've done the same kind of things with the send. You can see I send here a little bit less often, but some spark into the return, so it's creating these bursts of effect coming from time to time. And here I also have the auto filter, the low pass filter, which is modulated with the LFO, so add a bit of subtle variation. That's the thing with this kind of dub techno chord. When you have this chord going around, it's always a bit tricky to kind of make it modulating, but without changing the tone too much. You don't want to change the tone, because otherwise you're gonna kind of get bored very fast, or it can sound weird. But you want to keep the essence of the sound, but kind of make it feel like it's always changing, but without really hearing it. And it's quite a tricky thing to do, to be honest. And filters can be kind of saying sending to return, maybe playing with the FM if you can, or some other effect, adding some flanger. You have different way to do that. But yeah, in our chord 1, we have again our low pass filter modulating with the LFO. And we have as well this LFO with filtering. So this add continuous variation. That was the same done for the chord 2. But yeah, LFO are really one of the best way to kind of make things evolve over time. Then again, I had in the ambience LFO as well modulating this shifter, which basically is gonna add some pitch from time to time. You can hear the higher pitch now. I know. And you don't hear. It takes a bit of time compared to the dry wet to hear it or not, because of the reverb. Obviously it's like the washout, so you have the tail. But yeah, you have this sweeping effect I done as well. It's the LFO modulating this very high EQ. Just is getting this sweeping effect on the very high, so it's like very noisy. It's like Alright, that's pretty much it about automation variation. Now let's talk about mixing. If you're familiar with my video, you know what I'm gonna say. Mixing is 80-90% about sound selection, so making sure you select the right element that goes well together. And unfortunately, this the only way to get better is with experience. And as well, what I think make a big part of is having things at the right volume. And again, this is something that it's very hard to get better at, except if you practice. There is no really tips like, oh, you need to put this one at this volume or no, because each track is different. But yeah, this is things focus before to even start to think about, oh, I need to EQ, compress, whatever. Compression is one of the things I rarely use, if almost never. I use sidechain, which is kind of sidechain compression, but other than that, you will rarely see a compressor on one of my track. And then I will sometimes use saturation to add extra harmonics to make things a bit more louder. And then sometimes I will use EQ, for example, if I need to boost a certain frequency. I feel like it's gonna help this specific track to pop up a little bit more in the mix. Remove unnecessary frequency. For example, in the low, sometimes you can do a cut. Here, for example, I use channel EQ to kind of tame the very high frequency because I felt the sound was a bit too aggressive. But always EQ or any mixing decision, always do it because of a purpose. Like, you need to solve a problem. Don't EQ just because you have to EQ, or don't compress because, okay, mixing it's about a compression, EQ, a saturation, really delay, reverb. No, if it's no problem, don't try to fix something when there is no problem. And then other main element of mixing are usually delay and reverb, but with electronic music, I feel this is more like a sound design part. Even EQ usually is sound design. Yeah, let's have a look at each track and see. Because for example, here you see I have some EQ, but this is no mixing EQ because it's changing too much the tone of the kick to be a mixing EQ. This is really like, I wanted my kick to sound like this, so I apply EQ to make it sound like this. Here I talk about it next week, is I wanted my kick a little bit more muffled, reduce a little bit the transient, add a bit more body. This one maybe could be considered like a mixing EQ. Is afterward, when I kind of finish the track, I felt like the click was still a bit too clicky and had too much transient, so I use a high chef to kind of reduce that. But then into the hats, you can see up, just getting rid of the very high of frequency of the hat, and the open hat, nothing, and then everything goes into a reverb, into the rack. But there is no processing whatsoever, no EQ, no compression, no nothing. Then the perk, it's just a bit of reverb and a bit of panning as well, which can help. Because it was originally too much on the right and I wanted it more on the left, so that's why I've done that. And a bit of reverb. Reverb, I usually give the advice to try to be very gentle with the reverb, to don't do it too much, because you create a long reverb tail, which is usually very messy and kind of messed up with your mix. But for this track and for this kind of ambient stuff, usually like you need to have this very wash out reverb. So still you need to be careful, try to don't overdo it, because otherwise you're gonna have just a wall of noise. But here I have quite a big amount and decay. But this, for example, this kind of reverb for hats, I will do it just for this kind of techno, kind of more giving a more ambient feel to my track. Most of the time for hats or percussion, I will have a sharper decay and a bit less dry wet amount. Same for the clap. You see, usually I would go more like around 600 milliseconds just to have the room feeling. But yeah, here I tame a little bit the frequency. All right, and then let's see with the bass, nothing crazy, just a low pass filter and like boosting the frequency, but sidechain as well, like I said. But then nothing crazy in terms of EQing or compression. You can see it's nothing happening. And like I said, most of the delay reverb, it's more like sound design or like to kind of put in the room, but nothing like crazy mixing tips I can give you, to be honest. Yeah, I like to do drum bus sometimes because it's kind of a bus processing where you can compress everything. You can add a bit of crunch, which is gonna add some frequency in the mid-high, which is pretty nice. Again, some EQing. Cut to stereo is the same. In cost 3, what do we have? Yeah, you see like the low cut to get rid of unnecessary low frequency. All right, that's pretty much it about the mixing. Now let's go into the mastering. For the mastering now, I'm using my techno mastering chain. So basically, I always think that mastering should be left to the mastering engineer, someone who had the proper room, the proper experience, that really does that for a living. Nevertheless, I think it's good to have a bit of knowledge, you know, like how to master a little bit your track, just to have an idea how your track will sound if it's master, or if you need to play your track in a club. It's good to know. And when when I was doing my template, I was kind of always following the same chain, and that's why I decided to make a rack. I will put it in the description where I explain that, but it will be always first some global compression just to glue everything. Here the trick is to EQ the input, so this way we use a low cut, so this way your low end is not triggering your compression. If you don't use the EQ, what's gonna happen? You're gonna see with the EQ, and without, you get this pumping effect, like you can see even the needles going all over. This is because it's your low end, it's your kick drum triggering the compression, and you don't want that. What do you want? It's more like something that glue everything. So in order to don't have your kick or low end triggering your compression, you put an EQ on the input, and the EQ is gonna be a low cut. So you cut the low, so this way the low are not triggering your section compression, and it's more gonna be the other element. Then it depends. I try to stay between 0 and 5 dB of gain reduction. It really depends. I feel like if you go over, it's kind of scratch too much. It's like it's kind of feel a bit too much. And then I will use the makeup gain to compensate. Usually attack 30 milliseconds. You wanna a slower attack to let the transient pass, so you don't wanna smash the transient of your kick when you compress. And then the release, it really depends. But yeah, usually around that, and a ratio around 4. Soft clipping. This I activate in case sometimes with the makeup gain I go a bit crazy. Let's go actually to the louder part of the track. Alright, then what do we have? We have an EQ. I will always roll off this frequency under 30 Hz just because usually it's creating more problem than really adding something. You have a slight boost because of the Q at 50 Hz, and then as well you have a boost at 1 kilo, not even a dB, and at 3 kilo. This is again, it's an EQ I've made. It's basically controlled with this clarity macro. You can see if I boost, it's boosting this frequency. I found that this frequency are really great to add a bit of clarity to your track usually, so that's why I put that. Keep in mind, this is like a way to get a quick master. It's not like the perfect things that you will have for your definite master, but that's things that usually work and allow you to get a very good result very fast. So I had a bit of that, and then I have a low cut, but at 16 kilohertz, just to get rid of this as well very high frequency that not really are necessary. Here I have a hair bass, is helping the boost of the frequency of the low end. You're gonna first, I put it a little bit for this track, and then I remove it because I felt it was too much, but it is there because sometimes it can be needed. Here again, this is the high boost parameter here. It's just to put the high and the mid. You know, sometimes even when you mix, you don't realize that your mix is missing a little bit of higher energy, and mastering EQ is usually about rebalancing a little bit your mix. So then the utility just add a slight bit of stereo, but it's very gentle, and make sure everything under 120 is in mono. Then we have this, it's actually together with that, with the width. You see you have the stereo width macro here. We don't really have a proper stereo imager device in Ableton, so you have to use mid-side EQ and this device, which is gonna be more an enhancer than really adding stereo. It adds a little bit, and then you have 2 stages of saturation, digital clip, analog clip, but I didn't use them here because it was not sounding good on this track. And then we have our limiter. So you have first the color limiter, which I use not really as a limiter, but more to add some warmth. I don't know, this limiter, I really love the saturation. It adds a bit of warmth, and usually as well you gain in loudness with this. And then we have 2 limiter, which gonna add just 1 dB. I use 2 because it's less abrupt than using just 1 with 2 dB of gain. Here's like 1 and 1, and yeah, it just works. Just to gain a little bit of loudness, but you know, you have to be gentle to don't squash anything. And yeah, then you go from And yeah, pretty much done as well with the mastering. So hope you like this video, hope you learn a few tricks here and there. If you want to grab the template, link in the description. It's a great way to support me. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.